It was the kind of day that felt like it had been pulled straight from a storybook. The sky was a smooth blue canvas, dotted with soft white clouds, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass. In the middle of Maplewood Lane, a quiet tree-lined street where neighbors still waved at one another, 7-year-old Lily Hastings sat cross-legged on the sidewalk, completely focused on her chalk masterpiece. Bright pinks, blues, and yellows dusted her fingers as she drew a winding path of stars and hearts, her tongue poked out of the corner of her mouth in concentration. Every so often, she glanced back at Max, her German shepherd, who lay just a few feet behind her in the yard, resting his head on his paws. Max wasn't just keeping watch, he was on duty, in his own quiet way. His ears twitched at every sound, a bird chirping, a door closing, the distant rumble of a delivery truck. But his eyes never strayed too far from Lily. She was his person, and even in this peaceful suburb, Max took his role seriously. Inside the garden nearby, Lily's mother, Karen, knelt next to a row of daisies, humming softly to herself. She had one eye on the flowers and the other on her daughter. Everything seemed just as it should be, calm, safe, predictable. But something in the air shifted. It was subtle at first. A slow-moving car turned onto the street and crept along the curb, its engine almost too quiet. Karen didn't notice it at first, but Max did. His head lifted, his body stiffened slightly, though he didn't bark. Lily kept drawing, oblivious to the way Max's eyes followed the car. The car stopped about 10 yards away. A man got out, wearing jeans and a plain gray t-shirt. He had sunglasses on, even though the sun had dipped behind a cloud. He looked around for a second, then started walking toward Lily. Karen looked up, instinctively wiping her hands on her gardening apron, her brow furrowed. She didn't recognize him, and in this neighborhood, that meant something. Strangers were rare. On Maplewood Lane, the man smiled as he approached. Not a wide smile, but just enough to seem polite. "Hey there," he said casually. "That's some really cool artwork you've got there." Lily looked up and blinked. She wasn't sure how to respond. "Thanks," she said softly. "What's your name?" he asked, his tone friendly but unfamiliar. He crouched slightly, trying to meet her eye level. "Do you live around here?" Max was on his feet now, silent but alert. His tail didn't wag. Karen stood up from the garden, wiping dirt off her palms. "Can I help you with something?" she called out, walking toward the sidewalk. The man glanced her way and raised a hand. "Oh, hi, I'm just asking the little one about her drawing. My niece loves to draw too." Karen stopped a few steps away, not fully convinced. Something about the way he said it didn't sit right. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Lily felt it too. It wasn't fear, not yet, but something inside her. A quiet voice that sounded a little like her dad whispered, "Be careful." She turned slightly, enough to see Max standing behind her. His body was still, his chest low to the ground. She remembered the training, not something her friends at school had learned, but something her dad had made into a game. A game with a rule. If you ever feel unsure, give Max the signal. She hesitated. The man stepped just a little closer. That was all she needed. Without saying a word, Lily moved her right hand behind her back and curled 2 fingers in a quick motion, just like her dad had shown her. Max saw it. His response was instant, but not chaotic. Karen hadn't seen the signal yet. The man hadn't either. But the next few seconds would change everything. The moment Lily gave the signal, Max shifted from calm companion to focused protector. His stance changed subtly, but deliberately. He didn't bark, he didn't growl, not yet. But his body language sent a silent warning. His paws were planted, ears forward, tail still, muscles engaged. Anyone paying attention would know. This dog was on high alert. But the man didn't notice. Not yet. Karen, now just a few steps behind Lily, felt a strange energy in the air. She glanced at Max and immediately recognized the difference in his posture. Her instincts kicked in. "Lily," she said carefully, "come here, please." The man turned slightly, keeping a smile on his face. "She's fine," he said casually. "I'm just chatting with her. I think I saw a lost dog sign back on the main road. Figured maybe she'd seen it." Max let out a single, low growl. Not loud, but unmistakable. The sound was like a warning bell in Karen's chest. She reached out and gently took Lily's hand. "Sir, we don't know you," she said, firmer this time, "and I'd appreciate it if you stepped back." For the first time, the man's expression shifted. Just slightly, a flicker of irritation passed across his face before the smile returned. "I'm not trying to bother anyone," he said. "It's just a simple question." But now Karen was fully alert. Max stepped forward, still between the man and Lily, his eyes locked. The dog wasn't barking or lunging. He was perfectly still, but he radiated a kind of tension that made the air feel tighter. Because Max wasn't just reacting randomly, he had been trained for this. Lily's father, Matt Hastings, had worked with law enforcement for over a decade, training canine units in everything from search and rescue to suspect control. When he retired early to spend more time with his family, he brought that knowledge home and made it part of their everyday life. Max had come from a line of working dogs, Even as a puppy, he showed signs of exceptional intelligence, obedience, and loyalty. While most families taught their dogs to sit and stay, Matt taught Max silent signals, scent response, and defensive positioning. He also taught his daughter. Matt always said, training a dog is only half the equation. The other half is teaching the human how to ask for help. To Lily, it was a game. She learned to give Max signals with hand movements hidden behind her back, or subtle cues with her eyes. She practiced in the living room, at the park, even in the grocery store. Max always responded, and they always got a treat or a laugh afterward. But now, here on her front lawn, the game had become real. Karen's voice was calm but steady. "We're done here," she said, guiding Lily behind her. "Please, leave." The man looked at Max, then at Karen, then back at Max again, and that's when it hit him. The dog wasn't just acting aggressive, he was trained. He wasn't going to bark wildly or charge. He was going to wait, watch, and protect, with perfect timing and precision. The man slowly raised his hands, in mock surrender. Okay, didn't mean to cause a scene. He turned and walked back toward his car, fast but controlled. He didn't want to run, not in front of that dog. Max remained still, head high, until the man drove away down the street and out of sight. Karen knelt beside Max and placed a hand on his back. "Good boy," she whispered, her heart pounding. She looked at Lily, who was quiet now, clutching a piece of blue chalk in one hand and Max's fur in the other. Inside the house, the phone was already in Karen's hand, and across the street, behind half-drawn curtains, neighbors were starting to take notice. By the time Karen stepped back into the house, her fingers were already dialing. She didn't hesitate, not for a second. The tone in the man's voice, the timing of his questions, the calculated steps, everything about the encounter had felt off. She couldn't brush it aside. Lily sat on the couch, hugging a cushion to her chest. Max lay at her feet like a sentry, his head up, eyes sharp, still alert despite the quiet. Karen spoke to the dispatcher clearly, recounting the conversation, the man's appearance, the car, the subtle signs that had set off every maternal instinct. The dispatcher reassured her an officer would be sent to check things out. Lily hadn't said much since they came inside. Karen crouched beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You okay, baby?" Lily nodded slowly. "I didn't like how he looked at me." Karen's throat tightened. "You did the right thing." Max knew exactly what to do because of you. Outside, the neighbors were stirring. Mr. Callahan across the street stood on his porch with a cup of coffee in hand, scanning the road. 2 houses down, a mother pulled her toddler back inside after hearing the low growl from Max minutes earlier. Suburbs had a rhythm, and today's had been broken. 10 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up to the curb. Officer Ramirez, who'd been with the precinct for nearly 20 years and knew every kid on the block, stepped out. Karen met him at the front door with a calm face, but her hands were still trembling. "Got the call," Ramirez said gently. "Strange man, gray shirt, sunglasses, asked your daughter questions." Karen nodded. "Too many, and he wouldn't walk away." Max stopped him from getting closer. Ramirez looked over at Max, who had followed Karen to the door. The dog sat at her side like a furry soldier. "That's a smart one you've got there," the officer said. "Any cameras around that might have picked it up?" "I think the Martins have one facing the street," Karen said, "and maybe the Nichols too." Ramirez made a few notes in his book. "We'll follow up. Might have just been someone being careless, but in cases like this, we take no chances." As the officer turned to walk the perimeter of the yard, Karen finally exhaled. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. She looked down at Max and scratched behind his ear. "Good boy," she whispered again. Meanwhile, in the back of the living room, Lily had finally spoken. "Mom," she called quietly. "He asked if I liked dogs." Karen looked at her. "What do you mean?" "He said he had a puppy in his car," Lily replied. "That maybe I could help him look. Then he asked if I lived here, or was just visiting." Karen felt the chill return, colder than before. Ramirez returned to the porch. The Nichols camera caught him pulling up. No plates, looks like they were removed or covered. "We've had 2 similar reports in the past month. Same vague story, different streets. No one's gotten a close enough look until now." Karen's stomach twisted. "You mean, he's been doing this before?" "Possibly," Ramirez said, "but your daughter giving that signal, that dog stepping in, it might have stopped something worse from happening today." Lily had wandered over now, standing beside Max, her hand resting on his head. Ramirez looked down at her. "You did good, kiddo. Most people freeze up. But you handled it like a pro." Lily managed a small smile. "Max doesn't freeze." Ramirez chuckled. "No, I don't suppose he does." But even as he spoke, he knew this wouldn't be the last time something like this happened in town. But maybe, thanks to one little girl and her loyal companion, the rest of the neighborhood would be a little more prepared. The next morning, the neighborhood didn't feel quite the same. It wasn't that anything looked different. The lawns were still perfectly trimmed. Mailboxes still lined the sidewalks. And kids rode their bikes just like they always had. but there was something invisible hanging in the air now. A heaviness, a kind of watchfulness that hadn't been there before. Karen noticed it as she walked Lily to the end of the driveway to wait for the school bus. She scanned every passing car without meaning to. Max, as usual, followed just behind them, leash loose in Karen's hand. But even Max seemed more alert than usual. His ears flicked at every sound, his eyes watching every movement. Lily stood quietly beside her mother, backpack on, thumb hooked through the strap. She looked tired, older somehow, as if the simple chalk-drawing girl from yesterday had grown up a little overnight. "Are you sure you want to go today?" Karen asked softly. "You can stay home if you want." Lily shook her head. "I want to see Emma." Karen nodded, squeezing her daughter's hand. "Okay, but you call me if anything feels weird." "All right, I will." A bus turned the corner at the end of the street. Max let out a low oof, as if to confirm he was watching too. When the doors opened, Lily climbed on, gave one last pat to Max's head, and disappeared inside. Karen stood there, watching until the bus vanished down the block. Max didn't move, until it was out of sight. Back inside, the house felt unusually quiet. Matt had left early for a training session across town, and the silence left Karen too much space to think. She found herself pacing, replaying yesterday's events in her head. The man's strange smile, his calm voice, the casual questions, and the way he backed off only when he realized Max wasn't an ordinary dog. She wandered to the front window and peered through the curtains. A car passed, then another. Neither matched the gray one from yesterday. But she couldn't help scanning each license plate. That's when her phone buzzed. It was a text from Rebecca Martin, her neighbor across the street. "Hey, just talked to Officer Ramirez. He said the footage we gave him was helpful. They ran facial recognition. Guy might be tied to something bigger." Karen stared at the message. Her stomach tightened. She texted back quickly. "Something bigger." The dots bounced, not confirmed. But there were 2 incidents in another town just last week. Same story. Guy asking about puppies. One kid followed. Caught on traffic cam but never found. Same build, same walk. Karen covered her mouth with her hand. Max, now lying on the rug nearby, lifted his head as if sensing the shift in her mood. She lowered her phone and walked over to him, kneeling beside him. "You really knew, didn't you?" she whispered. Max didn't move. He just looked at her, with those calm, steady eyes. Later that afternoon, when Lily came home from school, she was quiet again. Karen made her favorite snack, apple slices with peanut butter, and they sat at the kitchen table together in silence. After a while, Lily looked up. "Is he coming back?" Karen hesitated. She didn't want to lie, but she also didn't want to scare her. "I don't think so," she said finally, "but if he does, we'll be ready." Lily nodded and reached down to scratch Max behind the ear. "He doesn't let people get too close." "No," Karen said, "he doesn't." That night, Karen double-checked every lock, every window. She even set up an old motion light she found in the garage, just in case. The sun dipped below the rooftops, casting long shadows across the lawn. And even though everything looked normal, on the outside, Karen knew better now. Sometimes danger didn't come with noise or chaos. Sometimes it came quietly, with a smile and too many questions. The following days passed without incident, but the feeling of unease never left. Even Max seemed to sense it. He slept with one ear raised and took his spot near the front door, each evening without being asked. If a shadow passed across the window, he was up. If a car slowed as it rolled past the house, he was already watching. Karen tried to return things to normal. She made pancakes on Saturday morning, let Lily invite her best friend over to play in the backyard, and even suggested a movie night. But normal didn't feel like it used to. There was always something hanging in the air. Not quite fear, but close. Max remained calm, but always ready. On Sunday afternoon, Matt returned from his weekend training course. He walked through the front door, duffel bag slung over his shoulder, and was immediately met by Max's familiar bark and tail thump. But even the dog's usual joy seemed a little restrained. Karen filled him in while Lily was playing outside. Matt's face grew tense with every detail. He asked about a puppy. He repeated, jaw clenched. Karen nodded. He said he had one in the car, that maybe she could help him look. Matt sat down heavily on the edge of the sofa, staring ahead for a long moment. That's one of the oldest tricks in the book. Max sat beside him now, quiet, still, as if listening. Matt leaned down and placed a hand on the dog's chest. "You did good, buddy." Karen watched the two of them, feeling a strange mix of comfort and dread. The police think he might be connected to other cases. They're not saying much yet, but I think they're worried. "They should be," Matt said, "because he'll be back." Karen's stomach dropped. "You really think so?" Matt nodded slowly. "Predators like that don't stop after one failed attempt. They watch, they wait, and when they don't get what they want the first time, they test again." That night, Matt pulled Max's training gear out of the hall closet. A canvas vest, reinforced leash, and a small pouch with emergency tools. Tools only someone in law enforcement would recognize. He knelt down and strapped the vest around Max's shoulders. The German Shepherd didn't resist. He stood tall and still, eyes focused on Matt like he knew exactly what was happening. Lily peeked around the corner. "Daddy, what are you doing?" Matt smiled gently, just giving Max a little extra armor. She walked over, crouched beside the dog, and ran her fingers along the strap. "Is he going to fight someone?" Matt shook his head. "No, but if someone ever tries to scare you again, Max will make sure they don't get close." Lily looked up at him. He already did. Matt's expression softened. He pulled her close. "That's why we trained him. That's why we taught you the signals. So even when we're not right next to you, you're never alone." Outside, the sky darkened early. Heavy clouds gathered above Maplewood Lane, and a steady wind began to rattle the trees. It wasn't just the weather that had changed. Something else had shifted. Matt stayed up that night, sitting by the window with Max at his side. He didn't say much. He didn't sleep. He just watched Dot and Max, as if sensing that his job was now more than ever about protection. Stayed awake too. Together, they waited in silence. Because sometimes the real heroes don't wear badges or capes. Sometimes they have paws, sharp instincts, and a quiet way of standing between danger and the ones they love. Monday morning brought with it a thick fog that rolled over Maplewood Lane like a slow-moving curtain. Visibility dropped, and the usual sounds of birds and sprinklers were oddly muted. It felt like the world was holding its breath. Lily stood by the window, watching the fog wrap itself around the trees. Max sat beside her, ears perked. He hadn't slept much, not since Saturday. Neither had Matt, who now stood sipping black coffee in the kitchen. One eye on the street. Karen was trying to move through the routine, packing Lily's lunch, reminding her to brush her teeth, feeding Max, but everything felt slower, heavier, as if time itself was dragging its feet. At 7:43 a.m., right on schedule, the school bus pulled around the corner, its headlights barely cutting through the mist. Karen and Matt walked Lily to the curb. Max followed, not letting Lily out of his sight. The three of them stood in silence until the bus came to a stop, its doors swinging open with a hiss. Matt knelt down and looked Lily in the eyes. "Remember what we talked about. Be aware. Don't talk to anyone outside the school. And if anything feels weird, you call us immediately." "I know," Lily said softly. "I promise." She turned and climbed aboard. Max let out a low chuff, the kind he usually saved for when something unsettled him. Karen bent to pet him, then watched the bus disappear into the fog. An hour later, the fog hadn't lifted. In fact, it had grown thicker. At 9:12 a.m., a white sedan appeared at the edge of the street. It didn't belong. Karen spotted it first from the kitchen window. It was parked just 2 houses down, engine idling, no movement inside. She called for Matt, who appeared within seconds. "That's not the same car, is it?" Karen asked, voice tense. "No," Matt said slowly, "but I don't like the way it's sitting there." He grabbed his phone and stepped outside. Max followed him, his body tense, tail low, ears forward. They moved quietly down the driveway, stopping just short of the mailbox. From there, Matt had a better view. The driver's side window was down just a crack. Inside, a man sat behind the wheel, sunglasses on, staring straight ahead, not reading, not texting, not moving. Max let out a low growl. The sound made the man glance toward them, just briefly, before looking away, too quickly. Matt didn't hesitate. He raised his phone and snapped a picture of the car, then one of the plates. As he did, the man reached for the gear shift. The white sedan eased forward, then pulled away, slowly at first, then faster as it turned the corner and vanished. Down the street. Karen was already calling Officer Ramirez before Matt even came back inside. 15 minutes later, 2 patrol cars rolled onto the block. Neighbors stepped onto porches again, murmuring, glancing around. It was happening again. Ramirez reviewed the photos carefully. Not the same man from Friday, but maybe part of the same pattern. "We've seen this before. A scout car, testing reactions, timing kids at the bus stop, checking if the coast is clear." Karen felt her stomach turn. "They're working together." "Could be," Ramirez said. "That's why Max reacting like this matters. They're watching, yes, but now they know they're being watched back." Matt nodded, jaw tight. "We're not waiting around anymore. If they come back, we're ready." That evening, the fog lifted. But the chill in the air remained. Max sat by the front window again, eyes fixed on the street. No barking, no pacing, just stillness. The kind of stillness that comes from knowing something is out there. Something patient, something watching. But what it didn't count on was that something just as patient was watching right back. Tuesday morning came with clearer skies and a quiet that felt almost too peaceful. The birds were back, the lawns glistened with dew, and from a distance, Maplewood Lane looked like the safest street in town. But everyone in the Winters household knew better. Karen was up before the sun, sitting at the kitchen table with a notebook in front of her. She wasn't journaling, she was planning routes, schedules, times. She had written down every unusual detail from the past 4 days. The gray shirt, the missing plates, the white sedan, the direction each car drove, the time they appeared. Matt stepped into the room, rubbing the back of his neck. Can't sleep either. Karen shook her head. I keep thinking, if we're a target, why this house? Why Lily? Is it random? Or are they watching us for a reason? Matt poured himself a cup of coffee and sat across from her. They're watching because we interrupted something, and they didn't expect. Max lay under the table, alert, even in rest. His ears twitched at the sound of every car passing outside. He hadn't truly relaxed since Friday. I talked to Ramirez late last night, Matt said. He's setting up a marked cruiser to patrol every hour, but he also suggested something else. Karen raised an eyebrow. What? A trap, Matt said simply. We fake our routine, make it obvious. Lily walks to the curb, like always. Max goes with her. But this time, I'm nearby, hidden, watching. Karen stared at him. That's dangerous. It's only dangerous for the guy if he shows up, Matt replied, and if he does, we finally get him. That afternoon, they sat Lily down and explained the plan. At first, her eyes widened with fear, but then, she looked at Max.com, Steady Max, and took a deep breath. I want to help, she said. So they rehearsed. Bat hid in the neighbor's garage across the street, in full view of the curb. He borrowed a long-lens camera from a friend at the department and clipped a small microphone to the strap of Lily's backpack. Karen stayed on the porch, pretending to water plants, phone in hand, ready to call for backup if anything looked off. Wednesday morning arrived. Lily stood at the curb with her backpack, just like always. Max sat at her side, wearing his vest. He didn't move, he didn't blink. His attention was locked on the road. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then, at 7:49 a.m., a black SUV rounded the corner. It didn't match any of the earlier descriptions, not gray, not white, but Karen felt it in her bones. Too slow, too deliberate. Its windows were tinted too dark for a family car. It pulled to a stop half a block down. Max stood up immediately. Inside the garage, Matt gripped the camera, snapping frames as fast as he could. He adjusted his angle, capturing every inch of the vehicle. Plate, bumper, driver's side. The SUV didn't move. Then, the rear passenger window rolled down just an inch. Lily stiffened, her fingers tightening around Max's collar. She didn't move, didn't speak. She just stood her ground. Max growled, low, a sound that carried all the way across the street. That was enough. The SUV inched forward, then suddenly hit the gas and sped off, tires squealing as it disappeared down the block. Matt was already sprinting across the lawn. Karen was on the phone with Ramirez before the echo of the engine had even faded. They had everything now, plate, make, model, face, and the man behind the wheel had made one fatal mistake. He underestimated a little girl, her loyal dog, and a family that refused to back down. It only took 48 hours. By Friday morning, Officer Ramirez was back at the Winters front door, this time with a different look on his face. It wasn't concern. It wasn't hesitation. It was something closer to relief. They got him, he said. Karen blinked. What? The man in the SUV, and the one from earlier in the week? Same group. Interstate Task Force has been following a pattern of child luring attempts across 3 counties, always disguised differently, always using new vehicles. But your photos, your camera angle, your timing, it gave them the thread they needed. Matt stood beside Karen on the porch, arms crossed, jaw tight. He'd barely slept since Wednesday, but he straightened at the words. They were watching neighborhoods with school routes. Ramirez continued, looking for gaps in parent attention, disguising it as friendliness, testing reactions. But they didn't expect this. He looked down at Max, who was lying calmly at Karen's feet, tail thumping once. Your dog, Ramirez said with a nod, is more than a pet. Max didn't move, didn't react. He didn't need praise. He knew what he had done. Inside, Lily peeked through the window, her face pressed to the glass. Karen waved her out. Lily came onto the porch slowly, still holding her favorite sketch pad. Her eyes were bright but cautious, as if the news hadn't quite sunk in yet. They won't come back, she asked. Ramirez knelt, so he was at her eye level. No, sweetheart. We've got them now. And thanks to Max, and to you, a lot of other kids are going to stay safe too. Lily looked at Max and gave him a soft scratch behind the ears. I knew he could do it. That evening, the whole neighborhood seemed to breathe again. A few families came by to say thank you. One neighbor brought cookies. Another dropped off a card with hand-drawn paw prints on it. Everyone had heard. Everyone knew. But no one could believe how close danger had come and how quietly it had been turned away. Karen finally allowed herself to exhale. The weight that had been pressing on her chest for days lifted, little by little. She watched Lily draw on the back patio while Max sat beside her like a statue, ever watchful, even as the skies turned golden. Matt joined her outside, 2 mugs in hand. You know, he said, sitting down beside her, for all the drills and training and reading we did when we got Max, Nothing really prepares you for the real moment. Karen smiled faintly. No, but Max was ready anyway. They both watched as Lily showed Max a drawing of him in full vest, standing tall like a superhero. The words at the top read, "My best friend, my guard dog, my hero." Karen's eyes misted. She'll never forget this. She shouldn't, Matt said, not the fear, but especially not the courage. The sun dipped low behind the trees, casting long shadows over the yard. But for the first time in a week, those shadows didn't feel threatening. They felt like peace. That night, Lily curled up in bed with Max beside her. His body stretched across the floor, but one paw rested gently against her mattress, just in case, just so she'd know he was there. And as sleep finally came, deep and undisturbed, a quiet thought drifted through the house, not spoken, not written, but deeply felt. Sometimes heroes don't make noise. They don't wear capes. They simply sit, silently guarding what matters most, never asking for thanks, never needing recognition. And when the moment comes, they rise.